I would like to introduce our two-part series, of which today is mostly about preparations for before Pesach, and then the second session will be whatever we don't cover, plus the actual Seder and Pesach itself, different things which are more relevant for the Yom Tov itself. We have a Siman Shulchan Aruch regarding Shalei L'Yachid Basal LaPesach. Things people are familiar with. You shouldn't say this meat is for Pesach, because meat could be for a Korban Pesach too. So you can say this in Yiddish, people say off Pesach, Al Pesach. So that's okay. But if you did it, you did it. But l'chatchila you say that this meat I'm buying for Yom Tov. That's a Siman Shulchan Aruch about this concept. And then at the end, the Alter Rebbe quotes from the Rekeach, and he says, "Lo yemer adam kama teirach Pesach zeh." A person shouldn't say how difficult Pesach is. It's a din Shulchan Aruch. Why? Ki Rasha mahu aimer. What does the Rasha say by the Seder? Ma aveda zeis lachem. What is this service for you? And what does he mean to say, says the Alter Rebbe? Ma teirach zeh lachem. What is all this hard work for? Who needs all of this hard work? Then at the end, the Alter Rebbe said many people are not careful in this, and there's a limut zchus, that they don't really mean that the Pesach is a burden. What they mean is all the chumras of Pesach and all the zehiras, and therefore it's not so bad, but it's only a limut zchus. The halach is you're not allowed to say it. But let's just think about it a moment. Me'edim la simcha. And the mitzvah of simcha is a mitzvah min ha-Torah. It's a mitzvah d'oraisa. It's an obligation on anoshim and noshim uktanim. The men, the women, and the children all have an obligation of simchas Yom Tov to be joyous Yom Tov. Now, that does not mean that a person cannot be happy. They're crawling on all fours to the Seder. But it makes it extremely difficult. How are you going to be happy if you're completely worn out? So if the Yom Tov was designed by הקודש Baruch Hu in such a way that it would be impossible to fulfill the mitzvah of Yom Tov and the mitzvah of Pesach without becoming completely worn out, so then you'd have to find some way of reconciling these two things. But it's not the case. It's not the case. Many of the things that are done for preparations for Pesach are what people call preparing for Pesach, that have nothing at all to do with the mitzvah of Pesach. And they have nothing at all to do with the Yom Tov, and I will explain. Some say that the whole idea of the concept of spring cleaning, that they have even by the Nachrim Lahavdil, they do spring cleaning. Where did they get it? They see the Yidden are cleaning for Pesach. And therefore they feel, okay, good, spring, things melted, the snow melted, and we can start, either it did or it didn't, but if the snow melted, so now it's time to start a new beginning, and it's time to air out your house, and to clean everything and wash everything. So if you have time, I'm not saying that there's not an inyan. There's a beautiful letter from the Frierdiker Rebbe where he describes when he was a child, when he walked into the shul the night of Pesach, and every last bit of glass was polished and sparkling, and how much it added to the Yom Tov. However, I guarantee you that the person that did that, he had help. Whoever was cleaning the shul over there, and everything else was taken care of. So when it comes to cleaning, house cleaning the walls and cleaning the ceiling and cleaning the windows, if it's a place where there's chametz, so then there's a mitzvah, you have to clean it. If it's a place that there's no shash chametz there, so then if you have time, and it's not going to interfere with your Simchas Yom Tov, by all means clean. There's no problem. But this is not an opportunity. If I don't do it now, I'm never going to get to it. So don't get to it. Or get to it after Yom Tov. If it's that important, you'll do it after Yom Tov. Pesach, I strongly urge and suggest that Pesach cleaning be limited to chametz. Okay, which means places where there's a chash chametz, that has to be cleaned, and it has to be cleaned thoroughly. But places which are not, if you want to do it, that's fine. After you finish cleaning for Pesach, meaning cleaning all the places where there's a possibility that chametz was there, so then by all means, this is a good time. You can wash all the other things that you always wanted to wash and never found time for. If you have time now, and you don't need to peel some potatoes, so use that time and do extra cleaning. But that's a lot of the teirach and a lot of the difficult work is that this is the time you have to rearrange all the clothing. Is this preparing for Pesach? It's not preparing. It has nothing to do with Pesach. It just has to do with the time. You're going through your house, so it's a time to rearrange things. Now, what is required as far as Pesach? So if you look in the Shulchan Aruch, it doesn't give us full guidelines how to deal with houses like the ones that we live in. We have a mitzvah, midiyaraisa, a prohibition of eating chametz on Pesach. You have a prohibition of eating chametz on Erev Pesach after midday. We have another prohibition of owning chametz. In fact, two prohibitions, bal yirah, bal yimotzeh. We have a positive mitzvah. This is all mitzvahs minat Torah, from the Taryag mitzvahs. We have a commandment to get rid of all of the chametz from our possession, to get rid of it on Erev Pesach, which you do by burning the chametz. We have a mitzvah midrabanan to check the house for chametz, bedikas chametz. And the beginning of Masechta Pesachim, the Gemara speaks all about bedikas chametz, and it explains that you have to check places where people walk into, say once a year even. If somebody walks in there with a piece of chametz, then that's a place that has to be checked. The example given over there is a wine cellar. And if the waiter in the middle of the meal might go with a piece of chametz in his hand because he has to get more wine from the wine cellar, so he might put down the piece of chametz and take the wine and bring it, and therefore you have to do bedikas chametz there. But if it's a place where they take from the big storage house to the small storage house, and the waiter would not walk there in the middle of the meal, that place does not need to be checked for chametz, because you don't walk in there with chametz. So therefore, a place that you checked last year for chametz, and you don't walk in there, nobody walks in there the whole year for chametz, does not need to be cleaned and does not even need to be checked. Places where chametz sometimes, let's say a bedroom. So people don't normally eat in the bedroom, maybe somebody's sick and they have breakfast in bed. Something is brought to them, so if there's chametz which was brought there, even if it's once a year, that place needs to be checked for chametz. Okay, but you're checking for chametz. You're not... you don't have to clean the liner of the mattress. It has nothing to do with bedikas chametz. That if you want to do cleaning and you have time, by all means, it's fine. There's no prohibition of doing it. But I think there's a lot of confusion in many cases about what is really being done mitzad eser chametz and what is being done because you have to clean every last thing. So clothing that's washed. So do people put food in their pockets? There's all discussion in the Shulchan Aruch about pockets. So the truth is, in the days of Gemara they had pockets, and we also today have pockets. One of the differences is that we have plastic bags, until they outlaw them completely, but we still have some plastic bags, and there are baggies and different things, and people carry their sandwiches normally not in their pocket. Normally they put it in a plastic bag. That doesn't mean that you send your children to school and they might not decide to put the sandwich in their pocket, or somebody else's sandwich in their pocket, or leave half of it, or they lost the bag, or whatever the case is, and there might be chametz in the pocket. So children's pockets, which are full of chametz, should be cleaned out. Okay, but presumably you don't, your shoes and your the women's clothing and grown men's clothing and the kapata, they're not, used to be by the Rebbe's Fabrengens, we'd go and put some challah inside before Keshel Bracha, they wash for a suit, and everybody put the challah in their pockets. Today, most people don't put challah in their pockets. If you do, then you have to check your pockets. But if you never ever put in your pockets, so that becomes a place that you don't normally use for chametz, and it does not need to be checked. So too closets in general, or the garage, or any of these things. If it's a place where you put chametz there, then it has to be checked. Now, if you're selling, one way which has become much more prevalent in later generations is selling the chametz. In previous generations, long ago, they didn't do that on a regular basis, certainly not real chametz be'en. But more recent years, it has become a widespread custom. According to the Alter Rebbe, our sale of chametz is a binding transaction, and therefore you're allowed to sell actual chametz. Some of the poskim consider it to be like a legal fiction, and therefore it's sort of like a safety net, but they really would not sell actual chametz, but we do. The Alter Rebbe, Tzemach Tzedek, all say that it's a mechira gemura. It also has to do perhaps with the fact that that Alter Rebbe brought a slight variation to make the transaction of a more binding nature, an art of Kabbalah. Not the time to go into it, but that's the nature of mechiras chametz. If you look in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, it says that when you're checking for chametz the night before Pesach, the night of bedikas chametz, since the sale doesn't take place until the next day, so therefore you have to check that place that's being sold for chametz. That's what it says in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. The Tzemach Tzedek says it's not the case, and therefore the place that's being sold does not need to be checked. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to check it, then you're going to find chametz. Then what are you going to do? You're selling the chametz, so it's not like it's going to be unexpected that you're going to find chametz in such a place. So I think that is a key to Simchas Yom Tov, is limiting the Pesach preparations to things that are relevant for Pesach and relevant for Yom Tov, and getting rid of the chametz. So you look on the Shulchan Aruch, it says that you have to clean your house for Pesach. It's a din in Shulchan Aruch, you have to clean your house for Pesach. When do you do it? You do it in the afternoon or the morning, the day before B'dikas Chametz. So this year, the first Seder is Friday night, so therefore Thursday night is B'dikas Chametz. So it says if you don't clean your house, and there's dirt and spider webs covering over the chametz, how are you going to find the chametz? You can't do b'dikas chametz. So therefore you have to sweep the floor before you do b'dikas chametz, because how else are you going to find the chametz? Okay? So that's where it says you have to clean for Pesach, so you have to sweep the floor on Erev Pesach. Okay? That's what you have to do to Al Pi Shulchan Aruch. Now if you have a bigger house, you don't have just one room, so then you have more floors to sweep. But any place where there is chametz, if you keep chametz on your on the shelf in your bathroom, and you have alcohol there, and it might be alcohol which is made from chametz, you have to get rid of that too. So you have to check there too. So it's not just the floor, but nevertheless, what you're cleaning and what you're checking for is chametz. It's not dirt. You got to get rid of the dirt if it's going to prevent you from finding chametz. Okay, but it's not a mitzvah to clean out dirt from Pesach. It's in general, it's a very good thing. A person should be clean, the house should be clean, and that's a very positive thing, but it does not have any connection, especially with Pesach, except that it helps you find chametz. Any questions? Had a question before?
If you just wash the clothes, you can check those pockets again for chametz. Does that get rid of that chametz?
It depends on how deep the pockets are. If there's chametz there, if you have a couple of crumbs there in the bottom, so it's probable that the soap made it already pogum. But it all depends. Your kids. You're going to find crumbs there, you're going to find kazayis there. It depends what it is. If there's food there, it's definitely kadai that it should be just, emptied out if you find food there. Yeah.
What about, we go to the store, we go somewhere, we go to a curtain, and wipe our hands with the curtain. Does that curtain
If they're using let's say the question, I'm going to repeat the question because this is the way it works with these recording gadgets. The question was, if the children wipe their dirty hands on the curtain, is the curtain now chametzik? So I wouldn't use that curtain as a tablecloth, okay? But I assume that if you would try to scrape off the chametz that got stuck to the curtain, you wouldn't be able to find anything, right? I mean, they're not taking a birthday cake and there's a kazayas, a birthday cake stuck to the thing. So there's a little stain on it that you don't have to. So let me make it clear. Let's open up to a more general discussion. The law is chametz kelim. If you have a pot that you use to cook spaghetti in, spaghetti is chametz gomer. You're not allowed to use that pot to cook pesach food in. It's obvious it's a chametz pot. However, there's no prohibition to own that pot on Pesach, even though it's full of tam chametz. It's chametz d'oraisa within 24 hours. Okay, it's chametz min haTorah, and you don't have to sell it either. According to the Shulchan Aruch, you have to put it in a place where people will remember not to use it. You put it away in a room. You put it on top of a shelf. There's no obligation to sell those kelim. We lock away the kelim. We do it. We sell the kelim. You sell the chametz on the kelim. I'm not going to go into that. Whether you sell the kelim, not sell the kelim, it's a whole other discussion. But there's no prohibition on owning that. So whatever the chametz might be absorbed, I find it a little bit unlikely, highly unlikely, that there's really going to be chametz absorbed over there in the curtain. But there's no obligation mitzad the laws of Pesach to wash the curtain. It's nice to wash curtains, wonderful to have clean curtains, but it has nothing to do with the chametz. Yes? Question? No. Next question. If tomato sauce flew on the curtain, take a napkin and wipe it off, but you don't have to send the curtains out to the cleaners. I mean, imagine you would anyway. If you saw tomato sauce on the curtains, you'd probably wipe it off anyway, right? A stain absorbed in the thing is not a chametz concern. Yes.
You're talking about something that's not food.
Correct. So that's why it's not a problem.
But then I'm having still an issue of I'm supposed to be worried or nervous.
No, no. You're not supposed to be worried or nervous.
I'm supposed to be concerned about the
You shouldn't be concerned either. You just sweep it up and get rid of it. That's all.
Alright. So I'm supposed to relax and only clean for chametz.
It doesn't say you're supposed to relax. It just says supposed to be b'simcha b'yom tov. If there's crumbs of chametz, take out a broom and sweep them up and throw them away. And that's the end of the story.
You know, we eat all day. The times that we are, whatever, I don't know if they eat all day. We eat all day long.
Anyway.
We just let food all over. So
Okay. So sweep. Take out a vacuum cleaner and vacuum, and then sweep, and don't get nervous. Correct. Yes. You don't have to wash dirt on the walls. Even if it's chametz, I doubt it's edible. You know, if you have dirt stuck to the wall, huh? Okay. Let's. Okay. Well, I don't know. You know, I'm not going to get into whether it's more than a kazaya stuck to the wall or less than a kazaya stuck to the wall. You know, if your children like to take, macaroni and make dough out of it and see if they can get it to stick to the wall, I would clean it off the wall. But short of that, I don't think. Dirt is not chametz. If it's chametz, then take it off the wall. If it's chametz, take it off the wall. But dirt is not chametz. I'll take another 2 questions. Yes? Windows with hand marks are not generally chametz. They're hand marks. We're going to talk about the kitchen later. Yes?
you can kosher the spaghetti pot, right?
Yes.
And also, what if your floors have are old wooden floors and they have a lot of grooves? So you were speaking it was just.
Okay, so in the days of the Gemara, instead of having cabinets, they used to have holes in the wall. And those were like cubby holes, and they were real holes. And sometimes they would go all the way through to your next door neighbor. So the question is, how far do you have to check? It's too small, you can't go crawling around in there. So it says a very, very interesting thing. It says it's going to be if you have a non-Jewish neighbor, and he's going to see it the night before Pesach, the Nachrim are like a little bit nervous. They hear rumors, the Jews with the matzahs, they have these things, they're worried about what the Jews are doing Pesach. Okay? Lilas Dam, there's the blood libels all through history. So we're worried that the non-Jewish neighbor next door is going to see shadows through his hole in the wall. You understand? You have a hole in the wall, which is your cubby hole. On the other side of the wall, there's another cubby hole, which is his cubby hole. And he's going to start seeing shadows and lights and things like that. He's going to start getting very nervous. And it might be a dangerous situation. So the law is, if you have a hole, and you can't really reach there, you just reach as much as you can, which is within your reach, and that's it. The rest of it, we remove our ownership from chametz by doing bedika, by checking, and doing bittul. Whatever I did not find in my checking for chametz, there's a kol chamira, which is printed in all the sidurim, and say whatever I didn't find is batul ka'afre da'ara, it's considered like worthless dust, and with that you renounce your ownership of it. So therefore, if you have a fridge, for example, and the refrigerator often has a vent in a place, a refrigerator or a freezer compartment, and it has a grate because the air needs to circulate. And you look down over there and say, oh, there's leftover challah down there. So now what are you going to do? Do you have to break apart your freezer in order to fish out the little pieces of challah? So whatever you can reach, you get. And whatever you cannot reach, even though it's there and you know it's there, you say kol chamira and you nullify it. You have no intention of pulling that out and eating it. So therefore you nullify it, and that's what you do with all of those. You asked about the cracks in the wooden floor, so the same thing applies to that. Whatever you can reach, take the vacuum, and whatever you can't, It speaks about holes in the floor in the Shulchan Aruch, but those are holes big enough you can put your hand inside. You're talking about little cracks you cannot get inside inside them. Let me go a little bit to the kitchen. If there are questions you have, you can jot them down, and you can give them to me, and if I get to them today, good, and if not, I'll try to get to them next time. But I'd like to touch on the issues that were sent out that would be covered tonight. So I said 2 more questions, so please hold your questions. If you want, you can pass them to the front or something. I'll take some more questions a little later, but that's, as far as cleaning, I'd just like to move on a little bit to the kitchen. What happens sometimes in a house is that a lot of time is spent, one other point I need for the cleaning and the checking. And that is, because of our different lifestyle and the homes in which we live in comparison with the days in which the Shulchan Aruch was written, to make a proper Bedikas Chametz on the night of Bedikas Chametz is very, very difficult. We don't just live in one room. They didn't have closets. They didn't have so much clothing as we have. And the whole process is much more difficult. What many of the poskim, today's poskim advise, is something which makes things in a way a lot, it's one extra step, but in the long run it makes things a lot easier. And that is, when you're cleaning for Pesach, who's really doing the Bedikas Chametz? The husband or the wife? The wife is doing she's checking for chametz, right? He's making a parade with a candle. He's parading with the candle, walking around, and it's even worse in some places where they say that the wife is afraid he's going to drip wax all over the carpet. So I had somebody say, so he had to go around with a piece of cardboard under the candle. So he had the cardboard under the handle, and he walked around the whole house doing b'dikas chametz. So I explained to him that you spent a very long time checking for chametz, checking the piece of cardboard for chametz, because that's the only place where the candle was shining. So he had very good illumination for the piece of cardboard, but everything else. So therefore, the poskim say, any place where you're afraid that either the flame could cause a fire, you're going to check underneath a mattress, the thing could easily catch fire, it's dangerous. You're checking a car, very difficult to keep the candle lit. And a car, especially if you have kids, full of chametz, very exciting surprises you can find inside a car. There are all sorts of crevices and different interesting hiding places for all different types of chametz. But to do that with a flashlight is perfectly acceptable halachically. It works better. And if you have a carpet and you're going to be afraid that you're going to drip the wax on the carpet and you're not going to check properly, so that's the opposite, the idea of b'dikas chametz. Okay. Electric light can be used for b'dikas chametz, but it has to be something light enough like a flashlight. So therefore, b'dikas chametz, according to halacha, you are allowed. There's a rabbinic takana that you have to do b'dikas chametz when Klal Yisrael, all Jewish people, everybody's making b'dikas chametz on the same night, and that's when you make the bracha on b'dikas chametz, and that's when you put out the 10 pieces. And you do the whole b'dikas chametz. That's the night l'arba aser, at the beginning of the night of Erev Pesach, which this year would be Thursday night. However, if you want to do b'dikas chametz on part of the house earlier than that, that's fine. In the sort of houses that we live in, it's not only fine, it's preferable. So when you finish, let's say you have a bedroom, and you clean the bedroom, and it's finished for Pesach over there. You just need one more step, okay? No bracha, no 10 pieces. Just take a flashlight, give a last look through the house. When it gets dark, at the time for a ma'ariv, when it hits ma'ariv time, Tzeisak Echavim, it's around a half hour after sundown, about a half hour after Shkia. You take out a flashlight, go through the room, and that's it. You're finished with that room until after Pesach. Just make sure no chametz goes in it, and you have done b'dikas chametz. What you need to do b'dikas chametz, cleaning a room or cleaning the house, is not the same as b'dikas chametz. B'dikas chametz needs 2 things. It should be done with the right light, and it should be done at the right time. The right light could be a candle or a flashlight, and the right time is at the beginning of the night. Okay? Very rare exceptions you could do in daylight. In general, daylight is not acceptable. One of the poskim, Nitya Gabriel, writes that checking a car you can do, he doesn't have a good source for it, in the Sfarim, but he does have a source from real life, and that is that by checking it in daylight, we see that you can see much better than you can with a candle at night, or even a flashlight by night, because the light is coming in from all directions, and it's much easier to check the car then. That you're allowed to do. That's an exception to the rule, but other things you shouldn't be satisfying your requirement of bedikas chametz by checking by daylight. So all you need to do at night is that one last step. It hits whatever the time is, whenever Tzeitzach Chavim is, around approximately a half hour after sundown. You just take a flashlight or something and just go through the places you just finished cleaning that day, and that's it. You're finished. Make sure no chametz comes into that room, and you have fulfilled the mitzvah of bedikas chametz. Now, you still need to leave at least one room at the end, and that you'll put down the 10 pieces and make the bracha and do the whole the takana de rabban of bedikas chametz. But I did want to mention, that's what led up to this whole thing, is that since often the dining room and the kitchen and the places where people are eating chametz the whole year is going to be changed over and become Pesach. So you're going to have to clean that, kasher it, cover it, wherever you're going to do. And that's usually left for last because everybody's eating chametz until everything becomes Pesach. So what happens is that the places that have the least possibility, there should be any possibility of chametz there, get all the attention, have much more time given to them. And then it comes to places where the chametz is, in reality, is left shortchanged because you don't have enough time for it. Because now you have to clean, you have to cover things, you have to start cooking, guests are coming, all sorts of things are happening. And you have less time for that, and it really should be the opposite. And if everybody has to eat on the porch, so keep your snow boots out, they'll eat on the porch, and there'll be good memories for later on, having them eat beforehand, and make sure that the place where the greatest possibility of the chametz residing, it should become no longer residential. You should get rid of it. Question? Any place within your possession there's a possibility that there was chametz, you should check, unless it's been there for so long that you're sure it's spoiled or you're sure the birds ate it. Okay? If it's chametz yodua, meaning that you know there's chametz there, so then it should be checked. But if you don't know and it's just a possibility, you don't have to do bedikas chametz outside where there are birds and other animals that would be eating it. But if you feed, like the example given in Shulchan Aruch, the people used to own birds. They had chickens, and you have to give the chickens food. So before Pesach, they gave them the chickens chametz. So then if you know that there's chametz in the yard, you have to make sure the chickens ate it up. But if you don't know, and maybe you had a barbecue, and maybe somebody left over a hot dog roll somewhere in the backyard, you don't need to check for that. It's assumed that it's spoiled, or the birds ate it, or the squirrels ate it, or something else happened to it. If it... Anything that you cannot clean properly, and there's a chash chametz in there, if you have a barbecue grill, question was, do you have to sell a barbecue grill for Pesach? Anything that had, if you barbecued rolls on that barbecue grill, that means they had chametz in there. If it was not cleaned, you have to either do bedikas chametz there, clean it and do bedikas chametz there, or cover it and sell it.
When you fill out the form to sell, it's all included?
You would have to label it. I'll talk about mechiras chametz in a second, what the procedure. Question? So then you'll have to check it. So if people are eating outside the days before because you made your kitchen Pesach and the people are eating outside, then there's chametz you do, and the people should clean up after themselves. Whatever, they should take care of it. And one of the ways of getting chametz, if somebody has chametz in the middle of Pesach, is a machlekes in the Gemara about whether you have to throw it in the river or it's good enough to crumble it and throw it into the wind. So once it's lost its suda, once it's no longer edible, you take it and you crumble it and it goes to the wind, so nobody's eating that chametz anymore. That would be sufficient before Pesach. On Pesach itself, you burn it or you do something else to it, but before Pesach, that's sufficient to get rid of it if it's crumbled into little pieces and thrown to the wind. Again, we only nullify this stuff that we didn't find. So if you didn't find it, if you swept it, you know that you dropped half a bagel on the floor, so then you have to pick it up and then get rid of it. If you didn't find it, or you tried to get it, or it fell under the porch, or the crumbs that you didn't pick up, or you can't go through the snow to pick it out, whatever the case is, so then you nullify it. Yes?
Are you saying that if you finished cleaning a couple of rooms, like the bedrooms, or
No bracha. If you're doing the bedikas chametz, the only time you ever make a bracha, that the blessing on bedikas chametz is only done once, and only the night when everybody's doing bedikas chametz, which is this year Thursday night. If you're doing it beforehand, it's perfectly valid to do bedikas chametz on some of the rooms beforehand, but it's done without a blessing, without the 10 pieces and so on. And you go and you look and for chametz and make sure there's no chametz there. Exactly. Yes. Mouse traps, the question is about mouse traps. Mouse traps, it depends what you put inside. Okay, you're trapping the mouse with something, right? So if it's a glue trap, and there's no food there, and you're just hoping the mouse walks into it, so I'm not aware of any chametz in glue traps. If you have another type of trap that has some sort of food in it, so those that say that even the poison, and this I was going to talk about, and I will talk about regarding products. But the law is if something became nifsal machilas kelev, so spoiled that even a dog wouldn't eat it before Pesach, there's no problem holding on to it during Pesach. Using it, we'll talk about that when I speak about different non-food products, cosmetics and things of this nature. Now this is poison, but evidently many of these many types of bait that are used for mice and rats, even though they're poison for a mouse and a rat, they're not poison for people, and they're chametz. So those that say that should be sold also. Okay, so even though you would think normally it's nifsal, but evidently, a little four-legged creature will get sick from it, but an adult or even a human being would not. That's what the Svarim say. I've never tried it. I don't really intend to test it, but that's what they say. They say it should be sold. Okay, this might sound funny, but it depends whether it's organic peanut butter or not. Kitnius is not chametz. Okay, so if you have it and it's just peanuts, you can hold on to it. It's no problem. You can't eat it, but the mouse can eat it, especially if afterwards it's going to, get a guillotine job. But once it's processed, it could have dextrose in it. Dextrose is often chametz. Many things today. I'll just put in, I'm going to speak about it later, or next time. I should probably speak about it this time. We're running out of time, so I'm going to have to cut short the questions. Different chumras, astringencies on Pesach. So Chassidim were known for being very strict in general kashrus. Lubavitch especially is very strict on kashrus. And when it comes to Pesach, even more so. There's no requirement in the Shulchan Aruch to peel vegetables. And for many, many years, decades, hundreds of years, Chassidim were peeling vegetables. In those days, there was really hardly any reason to peel the vegetables. Today, we have serious reasons to peel vegetables. They weren't putting anything on the peels in those days. Today, they won't even tell you what they're putting on the peels. Okay, there are whole legislative fights fought about what to put to coat what you're allowed to use to coat fruits and vegetables. They were going to put the only way they stopped animal fats from being used, straight animal fats, in order to coat fruit and vegetables, is that it was put through a clause that you would have to put the ingredients on every single fruit and vegetable. So whatever money they saved through using this coating, they would lose with the labeling, so they backed off. Okay, so there's much more issues, and so too in food processing. What used to be a simple procedure, today everything is complicated, and it's got all sorts of stuff in it. You're getting lemon juice, and you look at the label, and it'll say 100% pure lemon juice is the only ingredient. Okay, it's true it's the only ingredient, but in order to maximize the yield from the lemon to get the maximum juice out, they used enzymes, and the enzymes could be chametz, it could come from horse meat, it could come from anything. So yes, the ingredient is 100% lemon juice. It's just, they got a little horse there too, but that's not really an ingredient. It's only a processing agent, so we don't put it on the label. So there's all sorts of stuff. It could be chametz gomer, it could be nevelos and treifes, it could be from different parts of the animal kingdom that you're not interested in. So whatever hidurim people had in the past about eating pure food, that you know what's in it and you prepared it yourself, whatever it used to be in the past is much more relevant today than it ever was. Yes? Garbage cans, the question that you're asking, do you have to... You have to get rid of it. So they have over here in this neighborhood a special garbage pickup on Erev Pesach in the morning. Okay, so the thing about garbage cans, if it's a garbage, there's some garbage cans that belong to you, and there's some garbage cans that belong to the city. Okay, if it belongs to you, then you own everything that's in there. Now, you don't normally, we don't eat out of the garbage can. Okay, but that doesn't mean the food in the garbage can is inedible. There's a lot of food that leftovers that end up in the garbage pail that are edible. And if you own it, so then, bittul only helps if you don't know about it. If you know that there was leftover pizza and nobody wanted to eat the crust and it went into the garbage and it's sitting over there and it's still edible, so that's the proper thing to do with that. If you're not using, which most people are not, if you're not cleaning the garbage pail, you shouldn't be using it on Pesach, so then it should be sold. They put it together with the chametz and sell it. And whatever chametz actually that you have should be thrown in the garbage. You cannot, by the burning of the chametz, you can't take your whole garbage, bag of garbage over there and burn it together over there. They used to do that. There used to be, it looked like a bomb zone. Everybody used to take all the garbage and throw it, and then when you would make the burning of the chametz, and you'd see for the next 2 days, there's pieces of paper floating in the air. So they don't do that anymore, so you're just burning your 10 pieces. And the garbage, you take to the garbage pail and you throw it out. I'll take some more questions after. If you wouldn't mind writing them down, I just want to get a bit further. Mechiras. Yeah, she's talking about the outside garbage. The inside garbage pan will be the same thing, but you're going to use your garbage pail inside the house, so you got to clean it and use a garbage bag to do that. I spoke to the men about selling the chametz. I don't know if I really need to repeat that. If you're in another time zone, then you'll ask individually what you need to do about that. Okay, I said I was going to speak about non-food items and different things. So this you have to know before Pesach, what to buy, what not to buy. As far as food, let's talk about matzah. The greatest potential, curiously enough, the greatest potential of eating chametz on Pesach is the matzah. Okay, that's the only thing that you're eating that has flour and water. And that's why it's important to have matzah with good hashkacha. Matzah was the first, if I'm not mistaken, mitzvah the Rebbe. Somebody came and said he wanted to do something really big for the Rebbe for his birthday for Yud Aleph Nisan. He's going to give the Rebbe a blank check and the Rebbe should fill out the amount. He wants to do something really big. So the Rebbe said you should buy and distribute shmura matzah. He says, nobody wants to do something really, really big. So I said, really, really big? Yeah, really, really big. He says, then you should buy a lot of shmura matzah and give it out to people. And he kept insisting, and he kept getting the same answer from the Rebbe. The Rebbe didn't explain why, and I don't know why, but one of the very obvious things it says in Chassidus, brings from Kabbalah, that eating shmura matzah, specifically hand-baked round matzah, strengthens the emunah, strengthens the faith of a Jew, and therefore it has a tremendous effect on your peace of mind and connection with Hashem the rest of the year, and therefore it's very, very important to do that. Now, I'll mention again when it comes to the next session, but I do want to mention now as well, is that the mitzvah of eating matzah is only after Tzeisei Kechavim, which creates a problem when you have guests and it's very late. You cannot drink the 4 cups. Kadesh is the first of the 4 cups. Is a mitzvah in the Rabbanan to drink 4 cups on we'll soon discuss what, 4 cups of wine, on Pesach, and that has to be also after nightfall. So you're lighting candles 18 minutes before sundown, approximately 30-35 minutes afterwards, Tzeisei Kechavim. So that Kaddish cannot be before that, you're not Yetzer with that. So those that are in a difficult situation, they're making for groups of people, and they're going to sleep early, and the Chabad houses and things of this nature to discuss with the Rav individually what could be done to take care of that. So that's as far as the matzah is concerned. I'm not going to go into the details of different types of matzah, but that is something that has to be eaten at the correct time. We'll talk about the shiurim, I guess, how much to eat and the time period and whatnot. Speak about that next time. Yayin, so wine and grape juice can be used for the 4 cups or a mixture of both. And again, the shiurim we'll speak about next time, but you have to order the wine in advance. I would want to mention that I actually wrote an article in this year's the Vad Pesach guide explaining how it works with yayin mavushal. There are two very clear opinions, varying opinions about what constitutes yayin mavushal. When is the wine considered to be mavushal? Once it's mavushal, you're not worried about a nachri touching it or seeing it or any of these. Seeing is in Kabbalah. It's not a halachic problem to begin with. With a yid, is not a problem. Riyah, looking at it is not a halachic concern, even if a nachri does it. And yid, we don't worry about that at all. But once it's cooked, once it's yayin mavushal, then we don't worry about the nachri touching it, moving it, seeing it, or anything of the sort. However, since there are two different opinions about what constitutes bishul, is it a lower temperature or a higher temperature? If you want more details, you can read the article. There's a lower temperature and a higher temperature, and we paskin, most paskin really paskin like the higher temperature. So therefore, if you're using a hechsher and they use a lower temperature, then according to us and most of the paskin, many of the paskin, it's not called mavushal at all. So it could say mavushal on the label, but since there are two different opinions, you have to be an educated consumer. So there's an article on it here, and you can read it, and then you'll be, at least as far as this, an educated consumer. As far as maror is concerned, so the two types that we use, the Mishnah lists 5 different species that can be used for maror. The preferable species are romaine lettuce and horseradish. Horseradish, any maror, if it's soaked in a liquid, it's considered halachically like it's cooked, and maror has to be raw. So therefore, sometimes the stores want to make the maror, it comes very dirty, you dig it out of the ground, so they soak it in water so it should be clean. If they leave it in the water 24 hours, halachically it's cooked and it's useless for maror. All those little jars of kosher Pesach horseradish, you cannot use, you can't be yetzer with them with the seder. I mean, they're very hard to eat anyway, but to eat a kazayas of it, but even if you did, it's soaked in liquid, it's puzzle for maror. It might taste good for the people who use pre-produced products. It might taste good on gefilte fish, but it has nothing to do with the mitzvah of maror because it's soaked and it's invalid for maror. And not knowing, you might end up with something that was soaked. Huh? I mean, if it's dirty, they used to have the people would make the unwashed eggs. How to have the unwashed eggs? It said that once in the Rebbeim, they were very makpi because the Rebbitzins did not care whether the eggs were washed or not washed. And so they would get dafka unwashed eggs. So there's a big market in unwashed eggs. So they would take the washed eggs and then throw dirt on them so it looks like it's unwashed eggs. So it's. But I think maror you can probably I don't think anybody would take maror and then soak it in water and then throw dirt on it to make it look like it's not washed, right? Because they're washing it because they want it to look clean. So I don't think that's going to happen. In any case, it's something that one should be aware of. If you find the maror is still clean, stay away. As far as cosmetics and over-the-counter items, it's a whole subject in and of itself, so let me explain what's going on. According to the Shulchan Aruch, even if you have real chametz, the example brought in the Shulchan Aruch is ink that was made with beer, and the beer came from grain. The beer is 100% chametz, and that used to be the main ingredient in the ink. If you made the ink on Pesach, then you're not allowed to use that ink because it became prohibited when Pesach came in because it was beer, and then somebody made it into ink on Pesach, so it was chametz b'Pesach. Okay, so you can't use it. But if the ink was made before Pesach, in the process of making the beer into ink, that made it nifsal, spoiled, to the extent that a dog would not eat it, then the law is you don't need to sell it on Pesach. In addition, you can even use it on Pesach. Okay, it's Chol Hamoed, you're not supposed to write anyway, but there are cases you're allowed to write Chol Hamoed, so therefore you're allowed to write, even though the ink is primarily consisting of chametz. Furthermore, the old style pens, in order to get them starting to write, frequently you take the tip of the pen with the ink and put it in your tongue, touch it to your tongue. So it became a question, touching it to your tongue, is that now a problem? And the halacha is that we're not worried about that either, because even if it would happen, it's nifsal machilas kelev, and you have no intention to eat it, so it's not a problem. That being the case, So people frequently ask, why is it that you should have to look on a list to see what kind of deodorant to use or what type of other over-the-counter products to use? Okay. So there's a two-part answer to that question. Really? It's probably not a problem. So if you're really stuck and there'd be no other case, or you find somebody that forgot to sell it, do you have to throw it in the garbage? Probably not. There are a couple of issues, however, and which is why all the places come out with these lists. Problem number one, it's known that regular people wouldn't think of doing such a thing, but people that really like alcohol know where to get it, especially if they're in an alcohol detox program. They're alcoholics, so they know that in the detoxification programs for alcoholics, they have to take away the deodorant, they have to take away the perfume, and they have to take away all of these things, because it might not sound good to me and you, but you never tried it with some tomato sauce and Tabasco and some stuff to cover over the smell over there, and evidently it's not so terrible. Okay, and people drink it, and people get high from it. So it's not something the regular people would do. So do we have to worry about things that people that are not regular people would do? So Rabbi Moshe Feinstein seems to think yes. So that's problem number one. And there's another issue. Then when we look at all of the documents, when you sell chametz, you have to, each individual that's selling the chametz has to write on the shtar, on the document, where the chametz is located, because the nachri that's buying the chametz has to know where to find the chametz that he bought. He only put a down payment, he didn't finish paying for it yet, so he comes into your house and wants to take all of the boxes of macaroni that you stored over there in your cupboard and wrote chametz on the top. So he has to know where to find it. So he has to know your address, and he doesn't come in, excuse me, where's the chametz? You tell any place it's written chametz. He doesn't know how to read Hebrew, so he can bring a translator. Okay? So it says chametz on it, then it says the macaroni, and then he'll keep a count. I took 3 boxes of macaroni, it costs $1.29 per package, and he'll have to pay you after Pesach. Okay, we understand this doesn't happen. But nevertheless, legally, that's what happens. Now, so you have to write your address when you sell your chametz, so that the nachri has to be able to buy it. But the shtar that the Rav makes with the nachri doesn't list his address, but you just take all the other documents and put it together with his. But he has to list all conceivable types of chametz that are sold. And we have shtaris like this. We have documents from many Rabbanim from past generations. And strangely enough, we see that the big Rabbanim of previous generations, they sold paint, they sold perfume, they sold cosmetics, they sold all of these things that al pi halacha you don't really need to sell, and we see that they sold them. And it seems that the reason is because of the special stringency of Pesach, that these things were traditionally sold and not used. So that's the reason, even though strictly according to the halacha it might not be a problem, but nevertheless, especially today where you have so many non-chametzik alternatives, so that's why all the kashrus agencies come out with these lists. Now the lists are not 100%, and medications are different. Okay, these lists are primarily for over-the-counter medications like aspirin, Advil, things like this, and non-medicinal items like deodorant and perfume and things of this nature. The reason medications are not on the list, almost all the kashrus agencies took them off the lists the last number of years, because you had people that seriously needed their medication. It's pekuach nefesh, and even if it was chametz gomer, it was absolute chametz, they're required to use it. They have a heart condition or something else that requires them to take their medication, and they decided they wanted to be extra religious and not take the medication, and that was their last Pesach. Okay, so this is not allowed according to halacha. You have to take it, and especially, who says these things are chametz anyway? A very, very small percentage of these things are chametz. Even if it is chametz, it's already ruined by being mixed with something else, and the people need it anyway. So that's one issue. And the other issue is, if you're not putting real hashgacha with a contract on a product, you have really no control over it anyway. Very often, the companies themselves, they can't answer your questions. A major problem with most of these products is alcohol. So alcohol could be made from corn. Alcohol could be made from wheat. Alcohol could be made from milk. Alcohol can be made from wine. It can be made from all different sorts of things. So legally, according to Canadian law and American law, when you gas up at the gas station, it says 10% ethanol. Okay, that ethanol is the same ethanol that we're worried about in all of these products. It's ethyl alcohol. I used to call them when I was teaching the seminary the alcohol sisters: ethyl, methyl, and isopropyl. Okay, so the problem is ethyl. Watch out for ethyl. Methyl's okay, no problem. Isopropyl's no problem. But ethyl, you got to be careful. Ethanol is ethyl alcohol. So almost all of it is made out of corn. Corn is kitnius. It's not a problem to have benefit. You're allowed to get benefit from the organic peanut butter that you put in the trap over there. It's mutter ba'hana. We don't, Ashkenazim don't eat kitnius, but kitnius is allowed. You mutter ba'hana. The Alter Rebbe says, and people that would use oil to light to bench licht on Shabbos and Yom Tov, and they would use sesame seed oil or something like that, or some sort of kitnius, peanut oil, something like this, soybean oil. You're allowed to use it on Pesach. You can't eat the soybean oil, but you're allowed to have benefit from it, so therefore you can use it. And we're not worried someone's going to spill into the food. We're not worried about any of these things, so it's no problem using it. And so too, the alcohol in North America is almost all corn alcohol, very little chametz alcohol. In Europe it's different, so therefore you have to check. Very often the companies, when you call them, they don't even know what they're using. They themselves don't know. It doesn't matter to them what they're using, so they're not really that careful. They just know they need alcohol. And it doesn't make a difference in the final product whether this type of source or that type of source, and they don't really know. So they're not 100% accurate, the list. Most of them are accurate, but when it comes to medication and people, chas v'sholem, endangering themselves as a result, it's not worth the risk, and therefore the companies took off prescription medication, therefore it's not a problem. Most of the cases it's not food anyway. It's more of a problem with liquid medications than pills. Pills are not food. People don't normally sit down. You have people take a lot of supplements and a lot of pills, and they sit down. It looks like a mamash asuda shleim b'shaite. They have so many pills over there, but that's still not called derech achila, even if that's the regular way you eat. That's not called derech achila. People don't take out a knife and fork, put a napkin over here, and start making a suda out of a bunch of pills. It's not derech achila, and it's mixed in with something, and normally it has no taste. Liquids, frequently, they have flavors, and sometimes you can have glycerin, which is often a non-kosher ingredient, and that is the issue with these products. If it's a solid product, so we don't normally have this issue. So creams and powders and things of this nature, unless you know for sure it says oats in the ingredients or something like that, then you don't have to worry about it and check if it's a cream or a powder. If it's a solid, we don't have any evidence, even the alcoholics, of swallowing shoe polish in order to get a little alcohol out of it. Lipstick is a solid, so there are people that want to be more careful about things that are put on their lips, or toothpaste and mouthwash and things like this. Al pi din, let me just mention something. So the toothpaste listed over here are, according to the best or not, they're not under hashgacha, but the ones in the list over here have been checked, not only for chametz ingredients, but also for kashrus. Okay, what used to be very difficult to get toothpaste that didn't have animal products in it, because the glycerin, a much higher percentage of the glycerin used on the market was animal glycerin, and now it's a much higher percentage of plant glycerin, and gelatin is used less. They found ways of making usable toothpaste without using it. Gelatin is also a problematic ingredient. So those are kosher lepesach. When it comes to mouthwash, I'm just giving all things that are close to ingestion. Mouthwash, so there are some over here that don't have even kitnius. There's one that's listed over here that it doesn't have chametz but has kitnius. Technically speaking, toothpaste, according to most poskim, does not even need to be kosher because you're not eating it. You're not eating toothpaste. You're not drinking mouthwash. Nevertheless, it comes mitzad again, mitzad the chumrah of Pesach. If you're being careful about other things, then certainly things you put in your mouth you should be careful about. Lipstick in general is animal fat. So if you're not careful the whole year, so people are more careful Pesach than the rest of the year. You have people in the Jewish world that they don't keep kosher the whole year, but it comes Pesach, they'll keep Pesach. But when it comes to lipstick, things like this are very high percentage animal fat, but it's not really a problem. It's processed in such a way that it's not edible, and nobody is like for a snack, going to take some lipstick and, like you're hungry, you don't have anything with you, so you're going to bite off a piece and, swallow it. It's not food, and it's not used by anybody as food, so therefore it's not technically a problem. But there are kosher Pesach lipsticks, so why not use them? But technically speaking, it's not an issue. Okay, I think I'm over, so we'll take some questions. Yes?
If you have a guest at work, who's responsible for the cleaning and the bedikah?
Whoever owns the place at the time for bedikas chametz is responsible. So who was ever in ownership, when it hits the Thursday night, and it's a half hour approximately after sundown, whoever is in ownership of that place at that time has to do bedikas chametz. Yes?
Like all the products you have, I didn't understand, you sell them or you don't have to sell them? Like all the,
Okay, so I would differentiate. If it's solid, there's no need to sell it. Okay, if it's a liquid and it could be ingested somehow, then you should get one that's on the list as being kosher l'Pesach.
But you have to sell it. You have to,
If it's a chash chametz, so that's our source. One of the main sources for this stringency is the fact that this was always put in the documents of selling the chametz. So if you're not using it, it should be put away, tape, put in front of the cabinet saying it's chametz, and it should be sold with the chametz. Yeah. You should check if you have some. The question was vitamins such as iron. What about them? So people that need iron need iron. That's a question that should be brought to a pharmacist before. I probably should mention over here, you have in the VAD's booklet, so there will be a pharmacist available for 3 hours answering questions in the VAD. So March 21st, Wednesday, that's not today, is it? It's a week, it's next week, yeah? So you can ask all your questions to the pharmacist over there, but that's a good question because a person needs iron and doesn't take it for a week, they're going to be perhaps in bad shape, but you have to know what it is that you're taking, and again, lechatchila you take a kosher Pesach vitamin, but depending on what the condition is, you have a person, one person is just a supplement, and another person they have a serious case of anemia, and it's not an option to skip it. Depends on their situation, depends what it is they're taking. Yes. I should have discussed that now, but there are a lot of things I should have discussed now. The question was, if you're selling something, I'll make the question more general. If you're selling something, do you have to clean it too? Okay, so the short answer to that is no. Okay, the longer answer is that really the proper thing to do would be if the Nachri is buying your chametz, he has to be able to find it. So you can tell him, listen, I got a piece underneath the couch and I got a piece on top of the shelf, and it's your job. You want the chametz so badly, you go find it. Halachically speaking, so if you're able to and you have the time, that's something which is associated with Pesach. But if you don't have the time to do it, it's fine to just close the room and sell it, close the oven off, cover it over, mark it as chametz, and sell it. Technically speaking, you don't need to clean it. Again, the question was about books and shelves. There's a whole machlekes whether b'chal you have to check svarim. In general, the minig is that you have svarim that are regularly used on the table. You have benches and things like this. They're all around chametz, and those should be put away for Pesach. But something that you just didn't check, and the chances are remote, you don't normally use it on the table. So then what are the chances of finding chametz within the pages? Anything, if you have a china closet that has chametz kelim inside, so although it says in Pesach, Bal Yirah, chametz should not be seen, it doesn't mean you're not allowed to see it. You don't have to walk on the street, you walk by the Goyish bakery and you have to walk into the wall because you're not allowed to see chametz. If you sold it, it's not your chametz, so it's lo yirah l'cha chametz, you're not allowed to see your chametz. So therefore, if you sold the chametz which is in a china cabinet, for example, so there are those that have the minhag to cover it over with paper, but strictly speaking, halachically, it's not required. And as long as it's closed off, you tie it up with a piece of string, you put tape, whatever the case is, to mark it off and delineate that it's chametz. That's sufficient. Any other questions? Yes.
The capsules that they have now, the kosher Pesach, you have to take iron or something.
So that's an alternative. They sell kosher Pesach capsules
Yes.
here in Montreal.
I got paper that says, something says trees, T-R-E-E-S, and kosher Pesach. Absolutely.
Okay, so the law is that anytime something is wrapped in a non-food item, anything non-kosher can be consumed if it's wrapped up. The Gemara says, korchu b'siv, they took a non-edible material and ate it, even though it's not edible. Since it's not touching the throat and the place where you normally eat food, that's not called derech achila, and there's no prohibition of doing that. Most capsules today are made out of gelatin. There are those that want to say that not only it's not a problem because it's not food quality, but on the contrary, take something that's not kosher Pesach, put it inside a capsule, a gelatin capsule, since it's not food, that's even better. That's like wrapping it up with a tissue or something like that. So most of the poskim say not like that, because the gelatin they're using for the capsules is the same gelatin they're using to make jello or any other thing which is a regular ingredient. But if you have something made out of cellulose and it's really not food grade, so perhaps that could be an alternative for a iron pill or something like that. Just break and put in one of those capsules. Yes? Okay, so if the doctor prescribed it and you need to take it, so the best thing to do is to call the pharmacist, give them the brand, and they'll tell you if there's a problem with it. And if not, to find just call up. They have in the Vad's book over here. It has the phone number over there. You can call the Vad. But he's there for 3 hours to answer just questions like this and tell you if there's an alternative. Yes.
Whatever places you're selling the chametz, you have to like keep it or put it on the
The question is, the places that are being sold for chametz, do you have to tape it closed or label it? So the general principle is that the nachri has to be able to find his chametz. So there's two things. That it has to be marked off in such a way that people know they shouldn't go there. And so that's the tape and the identification, whether it's writing on the tape or whatever the case is. And then the nachri, unless you're going to write down every last place on your star mechira, which people normally don't do, then the nachri is not going to be able to find it. Theoretically, he could ask you, but you have the first problem anyway. You have to keep people out of there in the middle of Pesach. They have to know not to go in there. Yes? Question is, do you have to sell a vacuum cleaner? In general, you don't sell. The only thing you sell on Pesach is chametz anyway. So if you would sell a vacuum cleaner, you would sell the chametz in the vacuum cleaner. You're not selling your vacuum cleaner. Just want to make that clear. People think, I'm selling my house for Pesach. He's not buying your house. He's buying the chametz in the house. Okay? So the place where the chametz would normally be would be in the bag. So the best, if you don't want to put your vacuum cleaner away with the chametz, let's say you want to use in the middle of Pesach, so the thing you do is that the last vacuuming you do, you take that bag and you throw it out with the chametz stick of garbage, and you put a fresh bag in, there's no reason you have to sell it. Chametz inside the tube, I mean, if you have a broken vacuum cleaner, you have to worry about chametz inside the tube, but if it's working properly, check the brushes on the outside, make sure there's no challah stuck to it, and make sure there's no chametz ben, that's visible chametz over there, and then I don't see, even if you'd want to check inside, how would you check inside? Get some sort of, you can't get inside, you mavatal it, and it's not edible. Yes? No. In order to do b'dikas chametz before, it should be done at night. B'dikas chametz is done at night. Yes? If the question is if you're selling the chametz in a room, again, you're not selling the room, you're selling the chametz in the room. Do you have to sweep the floor? So it's a proper thing to do, but technically speaking, you don't need to do chametz cleaning to make that room pasted like if you're selling the chametz in the room. Yes. Maybe speak to me after, okay? I think it's a little bit, yeah. Okay, if you have people traveling, so sometimes you might be on the receiving end of people traveling, sometimes you might be the one traveling. So the general idea is that an individual like you have a couple, so the balabas is required to do the rabbinic commandment of bedikas chametz. So takana, you have to do bedikas chametz. If you're traveling to somebody else's house and they're making the bedikas chametz, so then you do the bedikas chametz on the last night that you're present. You don't make a bracha in such a case, but you make bedikas chametz in your place. Let's say you're leaving Wednesday night, you're going to your in-laws, whatever the case is, so then you make bedikas chametz in your place Wednesday night without a bracha, and then that would be an exception to the rule. You would put down 10 pieces in that case, and then you'd burn that on Friday morning of Erev Pesach. An alternative that could be done in that case, if you're selling all the chametz, selling your house, selling the chametz in your house, then you can, if you get there before Thursday night, then you can acquire a room. If you're staying, whether a person's going to somebody else's house or going to a hotel, they're acquiring the room. If it's a hotel, they're paying for it. If they're going to their in-laws or something, so then you do an act of acquisition, give them $1 and rent it from them, and then it becomes your room, and then you can do bedikas chametz in that room. And then you don't technically need, it says in Shulchan Aruch that you should make bedikas chametz before you leave, but if you're selling it, then there's nothing to check. You still have the issue that you have to personally do the mitzvah of bedikas chametz, but you could do that in the place where you're going. So it's somewhat of a controversy in the Paskim whether you can make a bracha under those conditions. Some say yes, some say not. Rabbi Isaac Shvei Olav Shalom said that you could. So you can certainly rely on that. You could also hear the bracha from the balabas who's making the bracha for bedikas chametz on the rest of the house, and then you just say amen to that bracha, and then you do the bedikas chametz in the room that you've acquired.
What about like you have to clean it?
Again, this is the same question. I think it's the same question that just keeps getting asked. If you're selling something, you do not have a chiyuv to do bedikas chametz in that room.
I was saying like if I'm with somebody else's house.
I understand. Yeah, you don't have to. You don't have to. Well, that's what you're doing bedikas chametz. Yeah, you have to do bedikas chametz there. Yes.
You have an office that where you work, and you're not going to be going in there on Pesach. You just lock the door, nobody knows chametz, no nothing, all the chametz on wherever, and just sell it.
Question is, if you have an office and you're not going in there the whole Pesach, so then you can sell that place and you don't need to do any bedikas chametz there at all. Yes. I think we talked about the walls before. I don't want to get into the gory details of exactly what and how much there is and how high up on the wall and the recipe of what got stuck to the wall. You know, if like there's big globs of stuff, it probably pays just for cleanliness reasons to scrape it off there. But as far as the laws of the chances of spaghetti getting stuck there and jumping off the wall into your plate are slim. But you never know. Okay, it's late for everybody, and I know, I don't want to get to the point where everybody's just, want to hear all the questions because you don't want to go back to your Pesach cleaning.